Yeah. Run it up, blondo. Run it up, blondo.
What's going on, Magic Nation? So we're kind of in the dog days of the offseason, where there isn't much NBA news going around. Free agency is pretty much over, and the Orlando Magic probably aren't going to make any moves other than moving on for one of their veteran players like Terrence Ross or Gary Harris. So considering all of this, I thought it'd be a good time to start a throwback series where I'll release content about the history of the Orlando Magic for educating newer Magic fans and also fans of other teams about the history of my favorite team. You can say I'm sort of a Magic and NBA history buff, and making throwback content is something I'll enjoy doing for you guys. So without saying anything more, let's get right into the video. Alright, despite being a relatively young NBA franchise, the Magic have had quite an impactful history so far. We've had some of the most iconic NBA players in history, both in and past their primes, don our beautiful jerseys across the years. We've had memorable finals runs across different decades and extremely popular superstar players that define their eras. It's something to be proud of, I guess, even though it hasn't resulted in a chip yet. There's been many what ifs and fork in the road moments where one simple decision or not making one move could have altered the path of the Magic completely, possibly to a path filled with rings and more good times. Some of them are well documented, such as lowballing Shaq during his free agency, not granting every demand of Tim Duncan, Wisebroad and T-Mac, the whole 2016 offseason, blown draft picks. I can go on and on. But there's one unscrutinized one that bothered me for a long time as a fan. One decision that prevented the Magic franchise from possibly winning multiple titles. And that decision involves giving up on Amar'e Stoudemire. That's right, I'm going to talk about the time when we essentially traded 5-time All-NBA Amar'e Stoudemire. Now some of y'all are probably wondering, what? We never had Amar'e. What are you talking about? Well, longtime Magic fans might remember that he was ours for the taking, if only we never had agreed to make one meaningless move. Honestly, meaningless is an understatement. It was the most senseless trade in our history that prevented us from the opportunity to draft a local big man prospect with superstar potential to pair with a generational player in his prime in T-Mac. This whole fumble by John Gabriel and the Magic began in 1999 when they traded away Penny Hardaway to Phoenix. In that transaction, we acquired Pat Garrity, Danny Manning, a first-round pick in 2001, which we later traded that same summer to the Rockets. Gosh, we were just simply giving away first-rounders like they were candy during this era. And to make it worse, the 2001 NBA draft was low-key underrated. Zebo went right after the pick we had that we traded to Houston, and Gilbert Arenas and Tony Parker were also there for the taking. Anyways, the final asset that we got in the Penny trade was a future unprotected first-round pick in 2002. We held on to that pick until the first month of the 01-02 season, when we made one of the dumbest trades in our history. We traded fan favorite Bo Outlaw, plus giving the Suns back their pick in 2002 in a 3-team trade that landed us the corpse of Judd Buechler, who averaged a whopping 1.8 points per game for us, and was later bought out during the following summer. Like, we already had good shooters, especially for that era, and Buechler didn't even shoot well for us anyways. Like, what was the point of that trade? You can laugh at it now, but just senseless, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. That 01-02 season was just my second season as a Magic fan or NBA fan in general, and I wasn't old enough yet to understand the context behind certain trades during that time. During my research, I found that John Gabriel wanted to clear up some cap space to sign a big man free agent. Well, we didn't really spend much in the summer of 2002. The big splash was getting another corpse, that of Shawn Kemp. The additional cap space that they got from Bo Outlaw's contract, which he signed and extended in the summer of 2000, was used on Juwan Howard in the summer of 2003, who was another flop signing. So to get back on track, we traded Bo Outlaw and the 2002 Suns pick back to the Suns, which was extremely short-sighted because the Suns weren't a force out in the West at all. They had just traded Jason Kidd for Stephon Marbury, and Marbury didn't fit in at first. Shawn Marion was still young, and they hadn't yet traded for Joe Johnson. So that pick was destined to be in the lottery, yet we practically gave it up. So draft day 2002 came around, and the Suns were sitting nicely with the 9th pick. A pick we should have had. The Suns made a promise to Amar'e Stoudemire after an amazing workout, and prompted to select him 9th overall, and the rest was history. Now, we would have selected Amar'e if we'd kept that pick. Why am I so confident? Well, it was obvious that we needed a good power forward or center at that time. We were a bottom 5 rebounding team that season and also gave up a lot of points in the paint. T-Mac was constantly getting asked about when his team was going to get him some help in the front court. Back then, having a competent post presence was a requirement for any good team. We spent our remaining cap on bigs during that time, as I mentioned earlier, in Sean Kemp and Juwan Howard. And we traded Mike Miller for Drew Gooden in desperation of getting a post presence with potential. To further prove my point, we drafted a big that year in Ryan Humphries, who didn't last long in the NBA. Additionally, it was no secret that we were after Amar'e. John Gabriel even tried to package Mike Miller plus a first round pick in order to move up, but to no avail. And this is where my frustration comes from. They desperately wanted Amar'e. Just look at these quotes from Doc Rivers and John Gabriel on Amar'e back then. Amar'e was our guy, the perfect second option big man that T-Mac needed. All we had to do was stay patient and not trade away any of our picks in order to make a win now move, but we actually did. We fumbled the bag for Judd Bushler. With all due respect, he was an NBA champion with the Bulls, but for us, he was a scrub and probably one of the worst players in our history. And I know I'm not overreacting. This whole blunder doesn't get talked about enough in our fan base. It was obvious that we would have drafted Amar'e, which would have changed the whole trajectory of our franchise. T-Mac would have been healthier and probably won a playoff series for once. And man, T-Mac was my first idol I could remember growing up. And it pissed me off so much to watch his peers go deep in the playoffs while he instead had to deal with back injuries in the playoffs on top of trying to beat better teams basically on his own. Just to think, we would have ran the Eastern Conference, which was extremely weak in the early 2000s. Vince Carter, who was also one of my idols, became injury prone, which then eliminated the Raptors as a threat. Allen Iverson's 0-1 supporting cast got old, and the only teams that would have been in our way for a finals berth were the Pacers, Nets, and the Pistons, who won it all in 2004. We would have competed with them right away. Remember, Amar'e was a beast from the get-go. He won Rookie of the Year over Yao Ming and became a legit superstar and All-NBA player by his third season. T-Mac would have been healthier with less of a burden on him to carry the offense, and we would have kept Mike Miller too, with the power forward position covered up. So in this hypothetical scenario, that core would have competed from 2004 onwards. I think we would have made the conference finals in 2004, and yeah, probably would have lost to the Pistons because that team was stacked. However, here's a twist. I think Shaquille O'Neal would have joined us instead of the Miami Heat in the summer of 2004, which would have put us over the top and probably catapulted us into a dynasty. Back then, Shaq had made it clear that he would only play in, quote, tropical cities if you're ever to leave LA, but honestly, he only wanted to return to Florida. His current mansion in Orlando, I don't know if he built that while playing for the Magic or after, but he stayed in Orlando during off seasons, even when he played for the Lakers. Shaq has stated numerous times about how much he regretted leaving Orlando. Now, whether all this is just PR on his part is up to y'all to decide. But his return would have been the perfect opportunity for him to eliminate any regrets that he had. Winning a ring in Orlando would have allowed him the opportunity to remove the biggest blemish in what was supposed to be a perfect career. Additionally, Shaq was really close with Tracy Mcgrady throughout the years, and it would have been an easy transition for him to go from playing with Mamba to T-Mac. T-Mac has himself stated that Shaq was his mentor and one of his closest friends in the league. Furthermore, during this time, Shaq embraced the whole being a mentor role with Dwayne Wade. I think he would have done the same with Amar'e Stoudemire. I could envision a storyline that could have been played out of Shaq passing the torch on to the next dominant big man in the league, to Amar'e, on top of the storyline of Shaq's return to Orlando and bringing a title to the city where he started his career at. Shaq is a businessman, and that PR move would have been a savvy move. I can't remember what his relationship was like with the DeVos family back then, but I'm sure it wouldn't have mattered. Shaq was still box office, and we would have done everything in our power to get him if we had the chance. We probably would have packaged Grant Hill, who was finally ready to return, plus a bunch of picks to the Lakers, a package similar to what the Heat did. So, we would have been favorites to win it all with Shaq on board. He and Amar'e would have terrorized every front court in the Eastern Conference. Shaq was still a force in 2005. He even finished second in MVP voting behind Steve Nash. Shaq would have attracted a lot of defensive attention in the post, which would have generated a lot of shots, open shots for Mike Miller and T-Mac. And also Amar'e would have feasted on inferior bigs. Shaq and Amar'e were both underrated post passers and would have fed off well with each other. And if having those three leading our franchise wasn't enough, we also would have picked up some ring chasers on a premium for rounding out our roster. So for the 04-05 season, the Pacers would have weakened themselves anyways with the brawl, and this time around, I would have liked our chances with the Pistons. It's important to note that Amar'e actually fared well against Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace in all of their prime matchups. Of course, Amar'e never faced them in the playoffs, but Amar'e was also a playoff performer and he would have gave it to them, I'm sure. And of course, the San Antonio Spurs were tough since they had peak Tim Duncan and a great system. However, our offensive firepower would have undoubtedly been too much for them to handle. And also Amar'e really held his own against Tim Duncan during the playoff matchups throughout the years. And why stop there? T-Mac and Amar'e would have stayed healthier due to a lesser burden on them. There's no doubt that we would have won it all in 2006 as well, against the Mavericks who had nobody up front to stop both Amar'e and Shaq. To round off, all of this was a legit possibility if we never had agreed to make that pointless trade in 2001. We essentially traded Amar'e Stoudemire by giving away the opportunity of drafting him, as he would have been a shoo-in for our pick if only we'd kept it. Anyways guys, that's the end of the video. It was my first throwback one. I feel that it's a good time to make what if videos, as us Magic fans can bear them now that our future looks brighter with Jalen Suggs on board, plus owning all our picks in the foreseeable future. It's not far-fetched to believe that we could be contenders in the East within 5 years. I'll be making more throwback videos like this one if y'all want me to, so let me know by hitting the like button and a subscribe button if that's the case. And also, don't be hesitant to write in the comment section below about any topics that you want me to make a video on, and I'll be more than delighted to create one.